Tim, so good to have you. Um, I've really enjoyed working with you over the past several years and have been so impressed with all your accomplishments. So tell us, what do you do?
First of all, great to be with you too, Jim, and appreciate the kind words. And It's good to be here. So, for about the last 8 years or so, I've been the CEO of the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, doing my best to help Governor Murphy implement his economic development and economic growth agenda, and leading an extraordinary team of colleagues within the EDA.
Great. Tell us how you got here. Let's take it from high school or college and go from there.
I wasn't sure we were going to go through my permanent record. Hopefully, most of the bad stuff's hidden. But Yeah, so I'm from Jersey originally. Sometimes people, because I was most recently before this job in Connecticut, sometimes think I'm from Connecticut. Connecticut's a great state. My son was born there, but I'm from Jersey originally. I grew up in Bergen County. Went to Bergen Catholic High School up in Oradell. And then my parents still live in the same house I was born in, up in Maywood. Jersey, born and bred. Went to college down in DC, had a great experience there, and then went up to New York and worked on in finance for a number of years. Was at Lehman Brothers, which was a great firm until it wasn't, and then at Barclays, and then found my way to working for Mayor Bloomberg when he was the mayor of New York City, and had an extraordinary time working as part of his team, working for a guy named Bob Steele, who was the deputy mayor for economic development at the time. I was his chief of staff. And then from there, my wife got a job in Connecticut, and so we moved up to Connecticut for a few years. And then Governor Murphy got elected governor, and I got to know him and some of his key folks, and I got to come home and work for the home team.
Got it. And so what was it? What did you do for Bloomberg? So I mean, I think that sort of, you know, gave you a lot of great experiences and maybe a partial blueprint for what you did here. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so Mayor Bloomberg, obviously served 3 terms. I was there for most of the third term, and I was the chief of staff for the deputy mayor for economic development. And the way New York City is usually organized, or at least certainly under Mayor Bloomberg's leadership, there's 4 or 5 deputy mayors with sort of responsibility for issue areas. So there's a deputy mayor for operations and a deputy mayor for human services and one for economic development. The gentleman I worked for was Bob Steele, who was an extraordinary leader, and things we spent a lot of time working on, a lot of harmonious themes that you'd hear Governor Murphy talk about years later. I think it's one of the reasons Governor Murphy wanted me to think about doing this job was innovation, entrepreneurship, tech, life sciences. How do you grow more homegrown companies? How do you sort of refire that innovation engine? Mayor Bloomberg, one of his, I think, biggest accomplishments in the realm of economic development is the Cornell Tech campus on Roosevelt Island. I was part of the team that worked on that. You can certainly see some foreshadowing there of things like the Helix in New Brunswick, with the notion of collaboration between higher ed, the real economy, startups, all that. Yeah, working for Mayor Bloomberg was an extraordinary experience, and I think he left New York City, in an extraordinarily good place for his successors, which
That's
is what
great. Let's double
what
click
we're
on
trying to
that.
do in Jersey as well.
Exactly. But just I remember trying to attract um, trying to attract universities and try to do something that's similar to Cornell Tech, right, in Jersey City. I remember writing a letter to the governor or to the senator or both. And I'm just curious how that has um, aged. Has that had the impact, that was expected? Just in retrospect, I just want to digress for just a sec. The Roosevelt Island Tech, uh, that tech park.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you go back to the original ambition for, the deputy mayor I worked for launched that initiative in a speech at Google's headquarters. Google was small in New York at that time. It was, a fraction of what it would become in the decade and a half since. Um, but it was talking about sort of positioning New York City as a tech ecosystem in a much bigger way, and adding a new sort of engine, a piston to that engine in the form of this applied science campus. I think from that perspective, you look at New York City's tech economy, and obviously I'm principally rooting for Jersey in this, but I'm still rooting for projects that I used to work on. But New York City's tech economy is eons ahead of where you might have hoped it was going to be, 2007, 8, 9. Um, and Cornell Tech's a major, major contributor to that. And it's also, it's gotten other organizations and institutions to sort of step up their game too. The, Cornell Tech project gathered most of the headlines, but NYU and Columbia did major, applied sciences and engineering initiatives coming out of that exercise as well. And so I think it really put that issue front and center, and it stepped up New York City's game quite a bit. And Again, a lot of folks have borrowed that playbook. We certainly have borrowed parts of that playbook in Jersey with things like the Helix and a lot of the strategic innovation centers. Governor Raimondo, who went on to become Secretary Raimondo, ran a version of that play in Rhode Island and Providence that I think has gone quite well. And so I think, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, right? So there's been a lot of efforts to, replicate and put our own spin on that. Obviously, the Helix is a different cat than Roosevelt Island, but it's has a similar sort of thesis to it.
Yeah, and for sure, the region has benefited from that growth of that tech ecosystem in New York. New York. We benefited the whole region, so that's all good stuff. But when
For
you
the, for the
came,
last 8 years, I refer to New York as part of Greater New Jersey, but yeah, it's been a good. It is a regional ecosystem, and certainly growth in both places is a good thing.
for sure, but when you arrived, what did you see?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I saw a vision from Governor Murphy that was 100% aligned with what I would hope to work on from an economic development perspective, and that was two things. One, really focusing on small businesses and innovation entrepreneurship. That New Jersey had held its own more or less with big companies, the Fortune 500, the big pharma companies. Some challenges here and there, but broadly had done okay. That has had and has done okay there. In fact, added Fortune 500, a couple of Fortune 500 players over the years. But the state was not, and you and I had these conversations early on, was not doing all that it could to support the innovation ecosystem and the startup ecosystem. That's true in sort of traditional tech. That's true in life sciences. It's true in clean energy. Anywhere you might see sort of growth and scale companies emerging. New Jersey was not punching at its weight. Um, and so Governor Murphy made it very clear early on, that was where he wanted us to focus, where he wanted me to focus. And that was encouraging because I think that's, if you think about durable organic economic growth, it comes from small companies, particularly young companies, going from 1 to 2 people to 5 to 10 people to a couple thousand people. That's how you get durable growth. It's a lot less about, company X moving around from, state A to state B. You got to be in that game, and we've done pretty well in that game. But you really want to see, now we have a great example of it, the core weaves of the world going from literally a guy or two in a actual garage. Like that's not a made up story in that scenario. To a company that's worth whatever it's worth today, but a lot of money, employing a lot of people in Jersey, and we need lots more of that. But I think it's the path that Governor Murphy put us on from the beginning, and that's been a fun mission to try to execute.
For sure. What about the programs? Now, you've launched a lot, so give us sort of a breakdown of some of the early ones and some of the later ones through your tenure.
Yeah, by my count, we've launched a few more than 100 new programs. Some of those are large scale tax credit programs, like the Film and Digital Media Tax Credit Program or the Aspire program. Some of them are, relatively smaller investments. I think one of the things, if you looked at those 100 plus programs, I think you'd see a real diversity and variety of the types of not just interventions, whether those are grants or loans or tax credits, um, um, but you also see a real variety and diversity of areas of focus. So, and I think that's how you've got to approach economic development. We've got major efforts, yes, of course, in sector strategies like film and TV and in life sciences and in tech. But we also are, making major investments in economic security, things like childcare and food security, because we know that if you don't have strong foundations in those areas, your economic growth is impaired and flimsy. We've seen major investments. The Economic Development Authority, I think by my most recent count, has increased by 16 or 17 times the number of businesses directly impacted by our work, by our investments. A lot of that is our small business programs, our Main Street programs, because particularly during COVID, obviously COVID was a existential shock to the small business ecosystem, both sort of Main Street businesses and sort of startups. And I think Governor Murphy really doubled down on the strategy of but investing in small businesses during that time, and it's something we've carried on sort of post-pandemic as well. We've also done things like investing in arts and culture. We've invested in community development. We've invested in clean energy in a significant way. And so I think across those 100 plus programs, then there's an entire toolkit, which is probably the one you and I have spoken the most about over the years, which is the innovation and entrepreneurship toolkit. Things like the Evergreen Fund is a game changer. Things like Innovation Fellows, which is a program that encourages folks that are thinking about starting a new company to kind of take the leap and give them some salary replacement for a couple of years while they, maybe leave their job at a big company to go start a small company. We've seen things like the enhancement of the angel investor tax credit, which we've enhanced two or three times now with our partners in the legislature. And I should note, virtually all these things have been done in great partnership with the legislature, whether that's laws that have been passed, funds that have been appropriated to us, over the years. But I think the hallmark of the Murphy economic development and economic growth strategy is really a comprehensive approach to economic development. Yes, we want to attract big companies to come here, and we do a lot of that overseas, but we also want to grow companies and keep the companies we have here.
Got it. And what's again, so many programs. It's so impressive. I like to say that there was some silver linings to the pandemic. One was the exodus of all the talent, and entrepreneurs, uh, and those who started new businesses, right? There was a rise in entrepreneurship nationwide, but in New Jersey as well, which has been extraordinary. But also, some of that money was able to fund a lot of these programs. How do you see that, the impact of, the silver linings from COVID?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we wouldn't want to go through it again, but if we had to have gone through it, and particularly the human tragedies that came through those years, but certainly it made changed the trajectory of a lot of parts of the economy, the startup ecosystem, a big part of it. So, June of 2025 was the highest month New Jersey's ever had for startup formation in our history since we started keeping those records. And I think a lot of that is exactly as you said. It's a lot of folks who were at big companies and sort of got the entrepreneurial spark during COVID and haven't looked back since, and again continue to form new companies and blaze those trails. I think you also saw one of the things that, again, what you learn in a crisis. The EDA got a lot bigger and stronger in how we could rapidly deliver programs. And the team that I have the great fortune to work with has gotten quite good at responding, starting under things like Hurricane Sandy. To the credit of the prior administration, I think the EDA stood up a number of really great programs for particularly shore communities impacted by Superstorm Sandy or Hurricane Sandy, whatever it's called. But you know, we had a grant program approved by our board in mid-March or late March 2020, before the federal government had even passed the CARES Act. That was Governor Murphy said this is a crisis for small business. Of course, first and foremost, it's a public health crisis and a human crisis, but right behind it, it's an economic crisis. We better get our butts in gear to start helping. And we had a program up and running. I think it probably launched really early April of 2020, and I think that sort of set the stage for, hey, we can move fast, we can move deliberately, and we can move carefully, but we can also move fast. Um, to get resources where they need to go. And so when, Hurricane Ida comes along or the Route 80 closures come along, we can snap into action pretty fast. And I think that gave us a playbook. And a lot of, just to sort of close the full loop on a lot of different stories, a lot of the scrutiny that the EDA was under in the really early years of the Murphy administration about, how the EDA operated and what we needed to fix, set that stage. We got a lot better at how we take in data and review it and automate what we're reviewing, from starting with things like the tax credit compliance efforts, and that made it a lot. We got a lot better at how do we, borrow data from, for example, the Department of Labor or the Treasury and Taxation Department on an automated basis. That allowed us to move much more quickly when we were trying to give out grants to small businesses, because we could verify that data much faster than if we had to do a VLOOKUP on some massive, Excel spreadsheet of, Fred's Pizzeria, how many employees do they have? We could do that on an automated basis. And a lot of the things we went through early on set the stage for the growth and the success of the organization in the subsequent years.
Got it. What programs are you most proud of?
Yeah, it's like picking from your favorite kids, or your favorite among your kids. So I'd hesitate to pick one or two favorites, but I think, the innovation toolkit is certainly something I'm really, really proud of. I think the Strategic Innovation Centers platform, particularly the 12 that Governor Murphy has announced, I think that has planted a vineyard that not just Governor-elect Cheryl, but hopefully her, successors, for generations to come will be harvesting from those investments. The economic security toolkit I mentioned earlier. We made some announcements just this week about some investments in food security, and I think again that the hallmark of investing in those things while also investing in high growth industries, I think is the right way to think about this sort of the cocktail of economic development. And a lot of things too around inclusive growth. So, we've got a number of initiatives that are really focused on, making sure that, New Jersey's economic opportunities are open to everybody, particularly, minority, women, veteran, LGBT owned, immigrant owned businesses. Obviously that's a historic journey that we're on to sort of get where we need to be on those issues, but on that inclusive economic growth strategy, but making major investments in things like minority and women small business capacity has been a really important part of our toolkit as well.
Yeah. Talk to us a bit about the film production and that part of the sector or the economy that's really been extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, I think I guess we're late enough in the Murphy years where we could start thinking about legacy. I think that's certainly going to be one of Governor Murphy and First Lady Tammy Murphy, who's been an existential partner in the film story and in so many other things, but particularly in film. Um, Between Netflix at Fort Monmouth, Lionsgate in the South Ward of Newark, and now Paramount in Bayonne, and you've really got three kind of jewels in the crown that are going to build a long-term industry in this state. It's great when a production comes to town and shoots and takes over a couple blocks and shoots for a couple weeks. That's great because they spend a lot of money, they buy a lot of pizza, they use a lot of dry cleaning services, they hire security folks. Those are overwhelmingly union jobs and small business jobs. But when a Netflix, builds $1 billion campus, that's going to be permanent jobs and careers, for generations to come. And the transformation of Fort Monmouth in itself is a great story, but particularly having, Netflix, Paramount, Lionsgate, um, I think positions Jersey to be one of the top global filming destinations. And again, it's fun when the celebrities are in town, and it's fun to get to meet, Robert De Niro, which I got to do. That was pretty cool. But the impact is a couple hundred folks that are working on the production set that are supporting a De Niro movie. Um, that are putting food on their table in Jersey because of the film and TV industry. So I think that's been a huge success, and I think we're just getting warmed up. I think we're just scratching the surface of what that's going to mean for the state economy.
Yeah. In fact, I just got an inquiry from some colleagues in the Czech Republic who have a company who's looking to film in the
Great.
region. So, I mean, clearly that's going to accelerate. And it's wonderful to see. I was just in Philly earlier this week, and they're looking sort of and being envious of us, of all the programs. And of course, on podcasts, I've heard, people mentioning all the credits, how everything's moving from LA to places like our state. It's really incredible how we've become a model for other states and other, regions and other countries, frankly. Have you seen that from your end?
Yeah, I mean, I think Governor Murphy rightly gets credit, particularly in film and TV, for continuing to enhance and improve those programs. We started out in 2018. It was brought back that, Governor Murphy had campaigned on the, or, candidate Murphy had campaigned on the notion of bringing back the film and TV digital media tax credit. We did that in 2018, and then it's continued to kind of grow and expand. And I think it's a pretty good example of the cliche that success breeds success. And you have a Lionsgate committing, which sets the stage for Netflix and then Paramount, and we got a good thing going. And when you've got a good thing going, you keep doing it. And I think that's how Governor Murphy and certainly the legislature. That's been again, a great partnership with the legislature. Bipartisan, by the way, we've had lots of great support in both parties in both chambers for film and TV, and hopefully that again as the full economic impact of that industry blossoms, I think you're going to just continue to hopefully see that support only grow because they know that every state senator or assembly member is going to have people in their district that are putting food on their tables from the film and TV industry, and that's gonna make a big deal.
Speaking of the future, when will that impact be realized? All of those. I mean, I guess there's so many programs, right? And so, is there a certain date where we will see, or a certain range of dates when things will really sort of have an impact from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think the film story is sort of in its ascendancy right now. You've seen Netflix in particular. I think is making 5 or 6 movies in New Jersey right now, and that's even before they've got Fort Monmouth built out. Things like Happy Gilmore. Happy Gilmore 2 spent 150 something million dollars in New Jersey. It's a lot of money. That's a lot of vendors and craft services and all kinds of stuff that come with a production like that. So I think we're in the ascendancy, but we have not reached cruising altitude yet. So I think by the second half of this decade, particularly once Netflix is up and running in Oceanport and Eatontown, once you've got Lionsgate really rocking in Newark, and then Paramount and 1888 Studios in Bayonne. I think we're going to look back on these days as sort of the early innings of that effort, but of a really, really, really strong outcome.
What about programs that you didn't get to, or things that you had hoped to launch. Any of those?
Yeah, I mean, the fun thing about getting to work in economic development is there's always sort of new things and new issues you want to deal with. Obviously, AI, we're in, I don't know, everyone's got a different opinion on what phase of the cycle we're in on AI and whether this is, the minute one or, halfway through the development. I would say it's closer to the former than the latter. But, there's always new things that are popping up. And so, and crises they have to respond to and new developments. I think it's hard to think of a major issue area in economic development and economic growth broadly that Governor Murphy has not put his stamp on. Again, from whether it's innovation, economic security, small business. There's always more you can do. There's always, if you had all the money in the world, you could invest in a lot of different things. I think Governor Murphy's made an extraordinarily intelligent balance of investing in things like paying the pension and property tax relief and fully funding schools, which all are incredibly important and take a lot of capital, but also investing in growth. I think particularly during the post-pandemic years, significant investments in economic growth to really catalyze Jersey's recovery. And I think that has proven out in the data. New Jersey has added jobs faster than any state in the Northeast since June of 2020. That's not like a 1 month, cherry pick data point. Sometimes I pick cherry pick data. That's not one of them. We've been, 5 years, nearly 5.5 years running of, the fastest growing job economy in the Northeast. So I think those investments have borne a lot of fruit already, and they will continue to in the, decades to come.
Yeah, that is extraordinary. What about guidance for the new administration? And for the legislature? Anything that you want to leave them with?
Well, they don't need advice from me, but if they asked, I would say in a few different areas. And again, we got a good thing going in a lot of different areas, and I would uh, do our best to keep that going. Film and TV is a great example of that. We got tons of momentum there. Continue to focus on that would be an important one. The other really exciting opportunity, for Governor-elect Sherrill and her team and Lieutenant Governor-elect Caldwell, who, has been a friend and mentor on small business issues and lots of other issues over the years too. These Strategic Innovation Center investments, some of them, like the Helix are almost, out of the ground and built and are going to open early next year. Um, but the sort of the care and feeding of that opportunity, I think, is an incredibly fun opportunity for the next administration to get to work on because you can get whether it's fintech, aviation, and avionics and aeronautics down in Atlantic County, whether it's Plasma Forge in Princeton with Princeton Plasma Physics Lab, the AI Hub, all the life sciences initiatives, including the Helix um, the new one announced by Rowan and Cooper, which has legs into Trenton as well. Just the opportunity set that represents, I think, is an area that if I was king for a day, those would be a really high area of focus to make sure that those are the opportunity is maximized because I think Governor Murphy has laid an incredibly um, powerful foundation for future economic growth, particularly in lots of different ways. But those strategic innovation centers, I think, represent an extraordinary opportunity, and how to make the most of that is for the next team to get to work on. So I wish them 100% success in that.
Great. Great. And you're always just a phone call away, right?
I am, New Jersey is my home state. It'll always be where my heart is, and I can always around, always eager to help the home team.
Great. This has been great. Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you for your leadership and look forward to seeing what you do next. Hopefully, you'll take a little break and enjoy your family before you get on some other high-powered job.
I appreciate that, Jim. Thank you very much, and appreciate the time this morning.